You know what's fascinating? There's a car out there that was engineered by people who designed fighter jets, not styled by them, not inspired by them, actually engineered by aircraft designers who looked at the entire automotive industry and said, "You're all doing this wrong." And the crazy part? They were right. This car predicted the future of the entire industry 30 years before anyone else figured it out. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why a quirky Swedish sedan from the 1980s has more in common with your modern car than almost anything else from that era. And if you've ever wondered why some cars just feel different, more solid, more thoughtful, this is the story you need to hear. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1947, Sweden. A company that's been building military aircraft during World War II decides they want to make cars. Not because they need to, not because there's a gap in the market they want to fill, but because they genuinely believe they can do it better than everyone else. This company is Saab. And from day one, they approached car design like they approached airplane design, which meant they broke every rule in the automotive handbook. Their first car, the Saab 9-2, was immediately strange. The entire body was stamped from one piece of metal with cutouts for the windows. One piece, like an aircraft fuselage. Everyone else in the industry was bolting together dozens of separate panels. Saab said, "Why? That's structurally inefficient." The engine was a two-stroke, two-cylinder thing that sounded like a lawnmower. Then it became a two-stroke triple. Eventually, they stuck in a four-stroke V4 that was literally two-thirds of a Ford V6. They just chopped off two cylinders and called it a day. The 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, all basically the same car, evolved over 30 years on the same platform. Constant improvements, same foundation. About halfway through that run, in 1967, Saab introduced their second ever new car. Not their 10th, not their 5th, their second, the 9.9. And this is where things get interesting, because this car would become the blueprint for everything Saab built for the next 25 years. And more importantly, it would show the entire automotive industry what they should have been doing all along.
Here's what you need to understand about the 99. It wasn't designed by car people. It was designed by airplane people. And airplane people think about crashes very differently. In the 1960s, most car manufacturers treated crashes as unfortunate events where you just hoped the car held together long enough for help to arrive. Saab's engineers looked at crash safety the way they looked at aircraft. They used something called load paths. These are deliberate structural channels that direct impact force through a vehicle in a controlled way. In an airplane, load paths distribute stress across the airframe during hard landings, during turbulence, during anything that puts strain on the structure. Saab applied this exact thinking to the 99. The car featured a 1-inch thick reinforcement running in a perfectly straight line from the top of the A-pillar down to the base of the chassis, purpose-built to protect occupants in a rollover. How did they test it? They dropped the car from 8 feet in the air. The car barely noticed. They documented everything, kept improving. The 99 had a structure approximately 1/3 stiffer than other cars on the market. Now, 1/3 stiffer doesn't sound dramatic until you understand what that extra rigidity actually gave them.
First, obviously, crash safety. But also something nobody expected. The car didn't squeak. It didn't rattle. The doors closed with this solid, satisfying thunk instead of a tinny clang. And because the chassis was so rigid, the suspension could actually do its job properly. The handling was exceptional. All of this from engineers who simply figured that if you're going to build a structure, you might as well build it right the first time. Now here's where the 99 becomes genuinely impressive. The list of industry firsts on this car reads like a greatest hits of modern automotive safety. First ever side impact door beams. Before this car, nobody was putting steel reinforcement inside doors specifically to protect passengers from side collisions. Saab did it first. First headlight wipers. Yes, really. Little wipers for your headlights. This was Sweden. It snows there constantly. Your headlights get covered in slush and road grime, and suddenly you can't see anything. Saab's solution was elegantly obvious. Just put wipers on them. The doors extended past the sill. This seems like a tiny detail until you understand why. When you get out of a car in winter, your pants brush against the door sill. That sill is covered in road salt and snow and dirt. You walk around all day with a gray stripe on your leg. Saab's doors overlapped the sill so your pants stayed clean. World's first seat heaters. Again, Sweden. Cold. Leather seats in winter feel like sitting on a frozen lake. Saab fixed it. Activated carbon cabin filtration in the 1960s, when most cars still had vent windows and called it climate control. The windscreen was curved in a very specific way. It left more room for the driver's head in a crash while simultaneously providing excellent visibility and improved aerodynamics. One design element, 3 benefits. And that distinctive shape at the rear of the car, that concave section that looked like nothing else on the road, that wasn't styling. That wasn't a designer trying to be different for the sake of being different. Saab spent time in a wind tunnel in the 1960s studying airflow over the trailing edge of the roof. They were trying to control wake turbulence. The shape you see on a Saab is the result of actual wind tunnel testing, not design sketches. The 99 also had a flat underbody for aerodynamic efficiency. Saab claimed it was tied with the Citroën DS for the lowest drag coefficient of any production car. The DS, one of the most aerodynamically advanced cars ever built. And Saab said, yeah, we match that. These were airplane engineers. They didn't know you weren't supposed to wind tunnel test a family car in 1967. They just did it because it made sense. Now, let me tell you something fascinating about who actually bought these cars. In 1972, there was a study of university faculty that tracked the correlation between the car they drove and their political leanings. That year's presidential election was the second largest landslide in American history. Richard Nixon defeated George McGovern. Only 37.5% of the public voted for McGovern. However, 98% of Saab driving academics voted for him. 98%. The only group more liberal than Saab drivers were people who had no car at all. There's something poetic about that. A car built by Scandinavian engineers, designed with safety and efficiency and thoughtful details, attracting buyers who thought differently about the world. The car was a statement even when you weren't trying to make one. But here's where Saab really predicted the future. And this is the part that car enthusiasts have been arguing about for decades. In 1978, Saab added a turbocharger to the 99. Now, turbocharged cars existed before this. The Porsche 930 Turbo had come out a couple of years earlier, but that was a different animal entirely. The Porsche was a purpose-built sports car, wide fenders, whale tail spoiler, designed to go fast and look like it was going fast. The Saab was a family car, and that distinction matters more than you might think.
Porsche's goal with turbocharging was outright performance, ultimate horsepower numbers, lap times, the kind of power that made the car genuinely difficult to drive. Saab's goal was something else entirely. They wanted to maintain the efficiency of a relatively small four-cylinder while adding the smooth, effortless torque of a much bigger engine. Think about that philosophy for a moment. Don't make the engine bigger. Don't add more cylinders. Keep the small, efficient engine and just make it work harder when you need it to. This is exactly how modern cars work today. Every turbocharged four-cylinder on the road follows this philosophy. Your average crossover SUV runs a 2-liter turbo because it gives you 6-cylinder power with 4-cylinder fuel economy. Saab figured this out in 1978. The 99 Turbo established the recipe for today's quietly powerful 4-cylinder cars, not turbocharged for racing, turbocharged for real-world driving. The 99 Turbo only lasted a year in production before the 900 came out, and the 900 is where this whole philosophy came together into something truly remarkable. From the driver's seat rearward, the 900 was identical to the 99. Same glass, same doors, same body panels, same hatch. They didn't change anything that was already working. The changes were up front to address new U.S. crash regulations. The wheelbase stretched by 2 inches, the front extended by 8 inches. That critical rollover load path now formed a Z shape instead of a straight line, but it was still there, still doing its job. Every feature from the 99 carried over.
Let's talk about this engine layout, because it's genuinely one of the strangest things in automotive history. The 900 is a front-wheel drive car, pretty normal, but the engine sits longitudinally, front to back, the way it would sit in a rear-wheel drive car. And it's located almost entirely in front of the front axle. Here's where it gets weird. The engine is turned around 180 degrees, backwards, and leaned over at a 45-degree angle. Why 45 degrees? Because the 99's original engine was half of a Triumph Stag V8. V8s use 90-degree cylinder banks. Cut a 90-degree V8 in half, and you get a 45-degree slant 4. The engine drives the transmission via a chain, not a direct connection. A chain. Yes, really. This arrangement created some interesting service situations. Doing a clutch replacement was actually easier than replacing the belts. On most cars, the clutch is buried deep in the drivetrain. On a Saab 900, you could get to it pretty readily. The exhaust, though, the exhaust routing is something engineers probably lost sleep over. The exhaust exits the side of the cylinder head and travels forward toward the headlight. It encounters the turbocharger, then makes a U-turn and passes within approximately 1/4 inch of the battery's warning sticker about heat exposure. 1/4 inch. Then it finally routes toward the rear of the car. If you've ever wondered why Saab owners developed reputations as particular about maintenance, this is why. The car rewarded attention and punished neglect.
Now, let's talk about what made the Saab turbo system genuinely innovative. Because it wasn't just adding a turbocharger to an engine. That's the easy part. Saab developed something called APC, Automatic Performance Control. This was the first system to automatically reduce boost in response to engine knock. Engine knock happens when fuel ignites prematurely from heat and pressure instead of from the spark plug. It's bad. It damages engines. And turbocharged engines are particularly prone to it because the compressed air charge is hot. Most turbocharged engines of the era dealt with this by running extremely low compression ratios. The Porsche 911 Turbo ran a compression ratio of 6.5 to 1, very low. This gave the engine room to add boost without the air-fuel mixture getting hot enough to knock. The Saab 900 Turbo, toward the end of its production run, had a compression ratio of 9 to 1. That's a massive difference. High compression means better efficiency when you're off boost. You're not wasting energy. But it also means more knock risk when the turbo starts pushing air in. The APC system monitored for knock and automatically reduced boost pressure when it detected any. This meant Saab could run high compression for efficiency during normal driving, then still add turbo boost for power without destroying the engine. The car could run on low-octane fuel if that's all you had. It would just make less power. Fill it with premium and the system would let the turbo work harder. This was sophisticated engine management in an era when most cars still had carburetors.
Their wastegate design was also unusual. Most turbo systems regulate boost by monitoring intake charge pressure. More pressure means more boost, means you open the wastegate to bleed off exhaust and slow the turbo down. Saab's wastegate reacted to exhaust pressure instead. This changed the character of the power delivery. The Saab turbo's torque curve more closely resembled a larger naturally aspirated motor than a turbocharged one. Peak boost was only about 8 to 10 psi, not high by sports car standards. This meant it didn't produce huge horsepower numbers. When the APC first came out, the turbo engine made 135 horsepower compared to the naturally aspirated version's 110. 25 extra horsepower. Not exactly earth-shattering. But here's what the numbers don't tell you. The turbo torque down low made the 900 Turbo feel very quick around town at typical driving speeds. That modest top-end difference didn't matter much because you spent most of your time in the part of the rev range where the turbo actually helped. And importantly, the car wasn't sluggish off boost. High compression meant it didn't feel like it was waiting for the turbo to wake up. It just felt like a good engine that happened to have more to give when you asked for it. This is why modern turbocharged engines work the way they do. Small displacement for efficiency, high compression for throttle response, electronic boost management to prevent knock, tuned for real-world power, not peak horsepower numbers. The Saab 900 Turbo got there decades early. The interior was another area where Saab's aircraft heritage showed through. Fighter jet designers worked on the dashboard layout. The result wrapped around the driver for easier access and peripheral visibility. Controls were clear, easy to read, and laid out with the most frequently used items closest to the driver's line of sight. You didn't have to hunt for switches while driving. The radio was positioned up high. This seems obvious now, but in the 1970s and early 80s, other manufacturers routinely placed radios down by the driver's feet. You'd have to take your eyes completely off the road to change a station. Saab put it where you could see it with a glance. The emergency brake worked on the front wheels. This sounds wrong because almost every other car uses a rear emergency brake. But with a 60-40 weight distribution heavy in the front wheels held the car in place on a hill better. They did change this to the rear wheels for 1988, probably because mechanics were tired of explaining it. The ignition was between the seats down by the floor console. This wasn't Saab being quirky for the sake of it. To remove the key, you had to have the car in reverse gear. Then the shifter stayed locked in reverse. Multiple purposes here. Drivers didn't need to use the emergency brake in icy conditions where cables tend to freeze. The car wouldn't roll away if someone knocked it into neutral. And most importantly, it moved the key away from the area the driver's right knee would occupy in an accident. In a frontal impact, anything hard and protruding near your knee becomes a hazard. The steering column, the ignition key, anything. Saab moved the key somewhere it couldn't hurt you. Airplane thinking again. Where will body parts be during an impact? Don't put hard objects there. Now, you might be wondering how a car designed in 1967 could still be competitive in the late 80s. That's a 20-year-old platform competing with cars designed a decade later. The answer is that the fundamentals were so right that they aged exceptionally well. The driving experience was so good that the 99 came out in 1967, but the 900 was still holding its own against contemporary competition 2 decades later. Here's a remarkable fact. Saab reported sales increases every single month for 60 consecutive months, from 1982 to 1987. Every month for 5 years straight. Sales went up on a car that was 20 years old at that point. That doesn't happen with normal cars. Normal cars hit their peak and decline. The market moves on, newer designs come out with more features, and the old model fades. The 900 didn't fade. It kept finding new buyers who appreciated what it offered. Automotive journalist David E. Davis wrote about the 900 Turbo in 1982. His description captures something about the car that specifications can't. He called it a Mercedes-Benz that wandered out of the house one night during an acid experience and was never the same again. It existed in an altered state, he said, a marvelous blend of solid citizen values with a proclivity for the occasional breach of the peace. His conclusion about the Turbo was that it was a safe, practical car that you and Mom and the kids could use to escape from the cops. That captures the duality perfectly. Responsible engineering, unconventional execution. A car for people who wanted something thoughtful but refused to be boring. The Saab 900 Turbo wasn't a sports car pretending to be a family sedan. It wasn't a family sedan with a sporty trim package bolted on. It was something genuinely different. A car that took the entire automotive formula and rethought it from first principles. Should safety be a compromise? Saab said no and engineered load paths. Should efficiency require sacrificing power? Saab said no and pioneered practical turbocharging. Should good handling require a harsh ride? Saab said no and built a stiffer structure. Should the driver adapt to the car's layout? Saab said no and hired fighter jet designers to make the car adapt to the driver. Every assumption the automotive industry made, Saab questioned. Not all of their answers were right. Some of their engineering decisions created maintenance headaches.
The backwards-leaning engine with the exhaust routed past the battery wasn't exactly mechanic-friendly, but the fundamental philosophy was sound. Start with what the driver and passengers actually need. Work backward from there. Don't accept limitations just because everyone else has accepted them. This is why people compare Saab to Tesla. Not because of electric drivetrains, obviously the 900 ran on gasoline, but because of the approach. Coming from outside the traditional automotive industry, questioning assumptions, prioritizing different things than the established manufacturers. Tesla came from Silicon Valley and asked why cars couldn't work like computers. Saab came from aircraft manufacturing and asked why cars couldn't work like airplanes. Both found customers who appreciated the different perspective.
The 900 ended production in 1993, replaced by a new platform. Saab continued for another 2 decades before finally closing in 2012, a victim of corporate ownership changes and the 2008 financial crisis. But the ideas pioneered in the 99 and 900, those live on. Every modern turbocharged 4-cylinder with good low-end torque owes something to Saab's philosophy. Every car with side impact door beams uses technology Saab introduced. Every vehicle designed with crumple zones and load paths reflects thinking that Saab's aircraft engineers brought to automotive design. The heated seats keeping you comfortable right now? Saab did that first. The cabin air filter cleaning the air you breathe? Saab did that first. The dashboard designed around the driver instead of designed around what's easy to manufacture? Saab pushed the industry in that direction. And here's the thing about the Saab 900. You can still buy one. They made hundreds of thousands of them. They're solidly built. Many are still running. Values have climbed as people rediscover what made these cars special, but they're not unobtainable. If you want to experience 1980s automotive innovation, if you want to understand what it felt like to drive something designed by people who genuinely thought differently about cars, a Saab 900 Turbo is still out there waiting.
Just know what you're getting into. The backwards engine, the exhaust routing past the battery, the ignition between the seats, the need for owners who understand that unconventional engineering sometimes requires unconventional maintenance. But that's the trade-off. You can have a car that follows all the rules and works like every other car, or you can have a car built by airplane engineers who thought the rules were wrong. The Saab 900 was built for people who chose the second option. 98% of them apparently also voted for McGovern. So that's the story of the most over-engineered car ever built, an aircraft manufacturer's answer to automotive design, a preview of turbocharging philosophy that wouldn't become standard for 30 years. A car built by people who assumed that if you're going to engineer something, you might as well engineer it right. And if you're still watching, if you made it through this deep dive on Swedish cars with backwards engines and ignitions between the seats, you're exactly the kind of person who would have appreciated what Saab was trying to do. Subscribe to GearTales, because we're going to keep telling stories about cars that dared to be different. Drive safe, think differently, and I'll see you in the next one.